Hello students, it's time for Poetry Unit Lesson 4. We are going to be introducing and talking about the poetry tool alliteration, and then after that we're going to talk about the poetry form called free verse. You may say that it's a poetry form without form, but we'll get to that in a second. So anyway, the poetry tool that we're going to work on using today that I'd like you to put into your poem is alliteration. Okay? Alliteration is when you have a line or multiple lines in a poem that have the similar beginning sounds in many words. Okay, so you might have one line or you might have many lines in a poem that the sounds at the beginning of words are similar. Okay, it just makes it sound for a melodious sound. It makes the poem have a melodious sound. You don't want to get to the point where it's more like a tongue twister, where the entire thing is hard to say. Let me give you a couple of examples, and I've typed them up in your Google document as well. The creepy cat crawled across the carpet, keeping still. Okay, so the k sound is repeated there many times, right? K, creepy cat crawled, carpet, and keeping. Okay, another example: sad silhouette slumped over at Sally's sodden grave. Those do sound a lot like tongue twisters, and there's a lot of S's there. But we have Sally and sodden and slumped, right? So alliteration is when you're putting the beginning sounds of many words in a line or many lines of a poem. Okay, I am going to read one poem today that gives a good example of alliteration. Now, I'm using one of my favorite poetry books, Poetry Speaks to Children. This is an excellent book. We're actually going to read 3 poems out of this book today. But first, what we're going to do is read one poem that gives a really good example of alliteration. So let me try to get to that very quickly for you. So it is called Rabbit. Now I'm going to show this poem to you afterward because this poem, it's a great example of alliteration, but it also provides you a great example of how you can have fun with how you type up, with how you write down and then publish or type up your poem. Okay, but here we go. Listen to the sounds, especially the beginning sounds of this poem. Okay, a rabbit bit a little bit, an itty bitty little bit of beet. Then bit by bit he bit, because he liked the taste of it. But when he bit a wee bit more, it was more bitter than before. "This beet is bitter," Rabbit cried. "I feel a bit unwell inside." But when he bit another bite, that bit of beet seemed quite all right. Besides, when all is said and done, better bitter beet than none. And that was by Mary Ann Hoberman, by the way. So check out this picture. Isn't that a pretty neat way for the form? You heard the sound bit in there a lot. So what the poet did is put the bit down every time she wrote bit, it was down the center of the poem, and then the rest of the poem surrounded it. So that was pretty neat. But anyway, did you hear the alliteration? What sound was there at the beginning of many words? Did you remember? Bit obviously was in there a lot, but what sound was in there at the beginning of a lot of the words? The b sound, right? B sound. Okay, so that's a good example of alliteration, right? Bit and because and bitter, before, beat, bite, better, bitter, beat than none. Okay, so that's a good example of alliteration. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is the form I want you to work on today. And we're actually going to use this form a few times in this unit, okay? It's called free verse, all right? Many times, sometimes, I shouldn't say many times, but sometimes when people are writing poetry, they can get discouraged when they're trying to fit a certain form, like a haiku, right? Maybe you can't find enough syllables or the right amount of syllables, and that can become discouraging. Or maybe when you're rhyming a poem and you're having a really difficult time fitting in the exact rhyme that you need. Okay? Well, free verse is none of that. No form, no syllables, no rhyme schemes, no rhythm. I mean, there obviously can be some rhythm to a free verse poem, but what I mean by free verse poem, and I'll read what I typed to you in your Google document. Free verse poetry essentially has no rules. Okay, there are no required amounts of lines, syllables, rhyme schemes, and so on and so forth. Free verse is a way to creatively describe a topic, moment in time, or idea without rhyme or rhythm. Okay, it can still flow. Okay, poetry, as you saw with alliteration there, is meant to have a nice sound with it as well as good descriptions. Okay, but anyway, I'll read an example of a poem that I wrote to you to the class of free verse, and then I'll read a couple of more poems from this book. Okay, so here's a poem that I wrote for this assignment. The poets of yesterday have painted a mental picture of the ground. After the snow has melted and the last clumps of snowmen have floated away, as being a bland and boring brown. But I disagree, as the bare trees appear brown to me, but the ground beneath lies golden and bright, longing to grow into a splendid green. So there were no rhymes there. There were no certain amounts of lines that I needed to use in that poem. There was no rhyme scheme in that poem. And you may have noticed I used some alliteration there. At the end there, I had ground and golden and grow and green. So I had a lot of g and gr sounds at the beginning of my words. All right, I'm going to read two more poems that are examples of free verse poems, and then I'll let you write. Okay? So, got to find my tabs here. The first poem is called The Reason I Like Chocolate by Nikki Giovanni. The reason I like chocolate is I can lick my fingers and nobody tells me I'm not polite. I especially like scary movies because I can snuggle with my mommy or my big sister and they don't laugh. I like to cry sometimes because everybody says, "What's the matter? Don't cry." And I like books for all those reasons, but mostly because they just make me happy. And I really like to be happy. Really great poem. And again, there's no rhyming, no certain amount of words, no certain amount of syllables, no rhyme scheme. Okay, so that's a good example of um, free verse poetry. I'm going to read one more. We'll talk about the meaning of it a little bit, and then I'll let you go. So, How to Paint a Donkey by Naomi Nye. How to Paint a Donkey. She said the head was too large, the hooves too small. I could clean my paintbrush, but I couldn't get rid of that voice. While they watched, I crumpled him, let his blue body stain my hand. I cried when he hit the can. She smiled. I could try again. Maybe this is what I unfold in the dark, deciding, for the rest of my life, that donkey was just the right size. So I'll show you the illustration for that book, or for that poem. Did you understand what the poet was trying to get across there? By the way, again, with a free verse poem, there was no rhyme, no certain amount of lines, things like that, no certain amount of syllables. Did you understand what the poem was about, though? Here was a child, a student in art class, who was very proud of something that they created, and then the art teacher said something not in a mean way, and probably didn't intend at all to upset the child, but said to do it over again. The child was proud of something that she created, and then she threw it away because the art teacher told her to try again. So, in the end, she says, I decided for the rest of my life that donkey was just the right size. That she's still going to continue to be happy with what she makes and what she creates, even if other people feel that it's not right, that her creation is not correct. That she's still going to be proud of what she makes. So. Anyway, I hope you like those poems. I hope you enjoyed today's poetry assignment, and I can't wait to read them. Make a great day.